So we've obviously had a big weather event recently. How will that reprioritise your thinking now going into council?
Oh, very good question, and a very important one, Ali. There's some terrible stress out there in the community, and that's going to influence where council goes from now. And my big hope is, regardless of who gets the job as mayor, that the candidates who are vying for the job as a councillor take on board the fact that it cannot be business as usual. We're going to have to, as you say the word, reprioritise essentials versus nice to haves. The infrastructure damage will be enormous when the bill comes in. It will be right now. And it's a 10-year phase, in my view, before we can correct financially this disaster that's occurred. It's happened before.
And has that changed your thinking, if at all, in terms of the Three Waters proposition from government?
Not at all. No, I've got little time for that, on the basis of the fact that we have a health department with 700-odd pages, 711 pages that they're obliged to comply with. How much more do you need? I know that they let us down in Havelock North, whereby, as you well know, 4 people died because the establishment or the institutions failed in their obligation to monitor the supply. But the fact is, the health department is charged with doing that. Somebody should have been put in the gallows, really, over that. But they all escaped. So basically, unless the Three Waters legislation has a provision in it to put the heat on people who are negligent in the state service or the civil service, that's local government as well, of course, nothing's going to change. We'll have this. The potential for a similar problem is there unless people are held to account, Ali. Okay.
So, but you don't think with the big bill that is definitely facing the region now, that would be better to be dealt with by the taxpayer as opposed to directly on rates?
Well, I think all it'll do is give more excuses to build nice to haves than rebuild nice to haves, like the Suitor that I sweated blood over to get the finance 35 years ago to expand that significantly, and they put the diggers through it and spent 14 million on another one. It's all got to stop. The priority's got to be on infrastructure. Look at Wellington. They're all talking about nice to haves while the streets are blowing up. And is Three Waters going to change that?
So in terms of nice to haves, I'm going to ask you what your position is on the library precinct and what you think about that.
Total nonsense, utter nonsense in its position. 2 issues here. Do we need another library? And does it need to be in that position? Do we need another library? That's a debatable point. The one that's there seems to be working pretty good. The site is obviously ridiculous. Ridiculous in terms of what the what they call it, climate emergency policy purported to dictate initially. What's that? 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago.
2019.
When in fact another department in City Hall can say, "Oh no, it's going to be another 100 years before we need to worry." This is a climate emergency policy, so really that's heavily laced with negligence or bad management. That's what I'll say. Okay. And when a policy can be looked at 180 degrees each way.
Yeah, absolutely. And just thinking though about, say you're a business in town, young entrepreneurial company, and you want to attract people to come and live and work in Nelson. What do you think the council's role should be in actually creating a place where people want to come and live?
Oh, just change the culture within the walls, that's all. Don't get involved financially. Just simply say, please come. I've been trying to get hold of David Teese. If anybody can tell me where I can find David Teese, I want to get hold of David, because he's obviously a man that knows how to handle or is involved in this sort of structure that you're talking about, and he would be valuable. His comment would be valuable. So that's the sort of thing, if I ever got the job, the second day, not the first day, the second day, I would call in people like him and people from the community, which I've done in the past when I was a councillor. We did all the so-called inner city enhancement on the basis of having 50 people in that building, all with their spokespeople with full voting rights at committee level, and that would be my number one plank to get things going. Secondly, nobody's going to argue with me now, another road, arterial road, so long as it flies over Victory Square, Victory Zone, to give the people free access without having to deal with a freeway. Parking, much more parking. If you want to take cars out of the city, you've got to compensate. The car's here for keeps. I see the young mothers around my, not just them, around my neck of the woods in the wood, going to the coffee shops and whatnot, and their regular needs. They're rushing, very busy people. With the kids, of course, in the main, in their own private vehicle, doing what they need to do in their time, not be told by the Politburo that you'll ride a bus at 9 o'clock in the morning, okay?
So, and you mentioned about having a group of people who are experts or expertise coming in. So are you quite relaxed about having non-elected people making decisions for the city?
Very good point. Not on a permanent basis like we're seeing now. I would fire them straight away because all they've done is rubber stamp bad management. And the proof is, and I've just been with the Stoke Rugby Club, who have got a major problem up there, that the staff want to up their rent to $60,000 a year because the place is emptying out of tenants. They've got this enormous capital outlay that they're trying to recover, and they're asking the likes of the rugby club to bail them out. That's got to stop. Excuse me.
And just thinking about the rating system, which is something in Nelson, and for businesses, you know, the commercial rate and the differentials are quite an impact. Would you support reviewing that?
Oh, absolutely. The system has to have a radical rethink, and I don't know whether you've been watching any of the stuff that I've been putting out, the material.
Yes, I have, yeah.
And my belief is, as a starting point, we should consider a citizens tax or an add-on to the GST system, which is not difficult. With a need to have some sort of local recognition that certain activities use the facilities more than others, so there'd have to be a mix.
Sure.
But the current system is archaic. It's 400 years old. And it was instituted to clean out the ditches on the sides of the roads in Britain. But it's now become the handout to anybody that comes with a begging bowl to council table.
And just thinking about the sort of the economic support development side of things, Nelson City Council recently voted against establishing a holding company in partnership with TDC. Is that something that you would revisit?
Yeah, I've got two minds on that. I can see why they want to do it, but I'm not happy about it loading up the liability on your property and everybody else in this room. Their property will be loaded up as liable. You're liable for the debt. Are you aware of that?
Are we not as ratepayers, though, currently liable for the debt?
Yes, you are.
Yeah, so
yes, I'm just saying that
it doesn't really change.
No, it doesn't change the principle.
No.
But it sure changes the load.
Yes,
per property. So that's an aspect that needs to be understood. If they can put, I don't know the details, and I don't think very many people do. But if there's a case, a strong case for it, I mean, I know the airport must be struggling a bit because of that outlay down there.
And COVID.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So yes, there's room for a revisit. But I'm not hard or fast either way, okay?
And what do you see council's role is in terms of economic development and promoting the region? Where do you think council sits on that?
I doubt whether there's any benefit in them being involved, because unless you've got people with very clear expertise in certain avenues, I think it becomes just more confusing when people with academic qualifications have the authority to influence what's going on in your district. I'd say leave it to the people. They know. 180 years ago, the people knew what was needed, and they built all these not only the essentials, but the nice to haves.
The nice to haves, exactly.
As well.
Yeah,
They did it
yeah.
themselves.
Yeah.
They didn't call on the, well, in my, as I understand it, they asked little of the local authority. They did it.
Mm. And I just and just thinking of, you know, you saying you were on council. How many years ago you were on council?
Oh,
30
a
or
long time
something.
ago.
So
From 77 to 89.
So
yeah.
what would you say to people who are younger than me?
Mm.
How would you say that what you're thinking is relevant to them? You know, they're living in quite a different world to what it was at that time ago.
I'm very pleased you've asked
So
that.
how does that fit? in
Okay,
terms of
just
relevance?
back up a little bit. Before 1989, you were elected to council, you made the decisions, hopefully before midnight, because we had to get home to get some sleep so we could get up in the morning to earn a living. You didn't get paid. You made the decisions. The next day you picked up the pick and shovel and started the job. Now you've got a situation since 1989 where the CEO has virtual autonomy, and whether you like that word or not, the fact is that they can tell a mayor to keep out of my office, I'm running this joint, you go back and formulate policy, and I'll carry it out. Any candidate or mayoral or whatever that claims that they're going to shift the world when they get there is nonsense. You're bound by the statute or the act, which gives that opportunity of the CEO to call the shots in a lot of cases. Do you know that they can even intercept councillors' emails?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
you know all about
Everything's
that.
discoverable these days.
And then the RMA, of course, is an interesting document in that it gives staff the virtual right to determine the outcome of an application any way they see fit. So you get people, well, like we've all got, with their own philosophies and ideologies and agendas, and they're making these decisions. And I noticed one of your questions was, why are we having this problem between Nelson and Tasman? The reality is that each district, as you well know, I'm sure, is by law allowed to develop its own, what they call it, local resource management
yes, yeah. Plan. Yeah, yeah.
Consequently, you get these
Differences.
variations. So that needs addressing. And the third, the biggest one, I never thought it would be the biggest one, but the code of conduct issue is a huge issue, in that a mayor or a chair who's running an agenda, and that's part of the game, can reduce the impact of a opponent around the table by saying, sit down, councillor, you're humiliating your fellow councillors with your response. The person that gets up and has another go, I'll put you on charge if you keep this up. You know, it's really ridiculous. So thanks for asking the question. The fact is that unless the councillors understand that you're not going to shift the world while those three severe impediments are on you, to the point that really, I would say your input into the issues as a councillor is reduced to about a third.
So how would you change that?
Oh, well, okay. A lobby government through the local government conference setup, annual conference. Say, look here, this is not working. You've got to take this virtual autonomy away from CEOs and give it back to the likes of what we used to have under the heading of a town clerk, you remember.
Yes, yeah.
The RMA, I would throw it out completely, because it's hugely impacting on everybody's life. The cost of housing can be sheeted home, the vast increase in the cost. I would say by a third again. The costs are related to the process you have to go through the RMA. And the code of conduct, I didn't realise till recently that you can actually word it any way you like. You can say,
the council supports it.
You can say, we believe in the right to free speech without fear or favour. That's all you need. Instead of this vast document that you may have run your eye through. So those three things have got to be addressed, otherwise councillors' role will continue to be miserable and totally confused as to why you're not making any headway.
And thinking about something completely different now, public transport. What's your view on investment in public transport?
Well, I came out here at 9 o'clock this morning to see the rugby guys.
Yeah.
And the big bus went into town, and I think there were 3 or 4 people sitting in the back at 9 o'clock. We need public transport, but if I may be visionary, I think there are modern means of transport coming up that'll overcome a little bit of our... Look, Nelson and Wellington are similar. They've got difficult topography, as you know, and unless the bus can take doesn't matter what age you are, to your door with your groceries and whatnot, you're not going to use the bus. So I'm hoping that a new conveyance will be developed soon that can... I've been to the bus people, by the way, and talked about this. A new sort of conveyance, which I have seen in the States, but running on flat land, not hilly land. That's the problem here. So small buses, very small buses, or use the taxis. I'm sure it'd be cheaper than what we're doing, running these huge conveyances around with no people in them.
And just thinking, obviously, we sit very closely to Tasman, and so things like public transport go across them both, and we've talked about the port and the airport. Do you support amalgamation between Nelson City and Tasman District?
About, what would it be, 10, 15 years ago, we had a big
10 years ago,
input into that through the Nelson Residents Association, and we spent some time out at Saxton Stadium, the Saxton's Pavilion, with the Commission, talking for days over it. And my view is, and the associations was at the time, but my view, you asked me, that unless it recognises the need for a certain degree of local control or local input with teeth, which it hasn't got right now, everything still has to go through Richmond. Murchison, Takaka, Motueka, Brightwater, Nelson will need to have its own structure to accommodate people in that area on a day-to-day basis. The decision making, the big ones will have to be in a, what do you call it, a combined hub.
Yes.
But to just say amalgamation's a good idea without understanding the ramifications or implications of it is what I think is missing out of the debate.
And could you just describe to me, for people who'd be watching this, what your leadership style would be like?
I tell you this much, it's going to be difficult, whoever's there, because you've got wards which are arguably open to parochial attitudes. I was elected through, Nelson had the ward system when I was first elected. Within 2 or 3 years it was done away with on the basis that we were having this trouble with people viewing their own little neck of the woods as the only bit that matters. Okay, so then we've got this issue with race-based representation, Maori wards, not good. It's going to create a lot of stress.
Why should that create stress?
Well, why shouldn't we have a representative from the transport industry, the development industry, the retailers? Now, where does it stop? Because a mayor's...
I think though, if we've got a treaty, that's a slightly different thing. We don't have a treaty with retailers.
There's another major problem.
We probably won't go down that pathway now. We could get into a conversation that takes us well away from what we're talking about.
The RMA, of course, has enshrined in it the Treaty of Waitangi.
Absolutely.
And we make the rule. The community made the decision over this document, but in it, of course, it gives Maori guardianship rights to resources. Not a bad idea, but that's developing into ownership, and that's giving us a lot of stress in society, okay? So I'm being very frank with you.
Yeah, no, I can hear that. We might not use some of this, but that's okay.
No, I don't care. I don't care. I don't care, because it's got to be put out there that there's a big split occurring in society that we don't need. And for a mayor to be sitting up there trying to accommodate, and here's another thought, and you won't be broadcasting this, and I don't care if you do. Your focus will be tending to think, oh God Almighty, I don't want to, I can't offend this bracket of society that's sitting over here, otherwise we'll get deregistered. This sort of thing.
It's not about not offending though, it's probably more about accommodating, isn't it, and appreciating the differences?
You're there to run a big business, not it's not a social service, okay?
Isn't that what council is though?
No,
Isn't council there to deliver social support?
It's developed into that, but its basis is being lost because of all these side issues, okay?
Yeah, I'm just being given the 5-minute warning, but because I've got one more question to ask it. Well, it's not a question. If you were to sum up in a nutshell why people should vote for you, why should they vote for you?
I've got the experience, the knowledge and the understanding of what has to be done to return local government to local people. It's going to be a hard road. It's not going to be easy, getting back to your point about the chaos that's been created here just 3 weeks ago. The new council and the mayor is going to have to focus and be very firm on where the resources are going to have to be directed. And it won't be to the begging bowlers that come up to the table every year asking for handouts to keep their little interest going, which used to be done from the community itself.
If the community can't afford it though, and it's a good thing to deliver, where does council sit on that?
Anyway, we're in, and on a global basis, you can see what's happening. That reality is starting to hit them in Europe in a big way, which is going to wash over us. When we've got Chinese problems and all sorts of issues right now that are going to have a big impact on the way our society runs from here on. So you're going to have people in there with a strong understanding of how it used to be, how it used to run very effectively and efficiently. We got the work done back then by that list there that I've shown you there. Nothing like that has occurred since 1989.